All right, because I know y'all are totally excited about this. This is the second part, or part two, of the sample presentation. And there will be a part three. I know you guys are so excited about this. All right, so basically, this one, hopefully it's shorter than an hour, who knows, is really going to be about the breakdown of my presentation. So this isn't should you do the same things that I'm doing, but what I'm going to do is try to show you some of my thought processes as to how I get to different places. Now, does that mean that you need to break yours down exactly the same way? No. If there is another way that you want to go with it, please feel free. This is really about your expression. I'm just giving you one possible route out of like a million. Okay, basically, what I begin with is my real life situation. So I started with The Science of Us, one of my absolute favorites. But keep in mind that this is not about like how highbrow or whatever it is that you read, but also about sort of so it can be anything of interest, right? I'm a bit I'm a bit nerdful, so I read Science of Us, but I also read some things that are a little less highbrow, and by that I mean dirt. And you can start there as well. It doesn't matter. So one of the things that I found what really interesting recently was, and when they first published about this, I actually didn't read it because I kind of wasn't that interested in it. But as more and more things started coming out from the Science of Us, I was really interested in this retraction of a recently published study. So, and I'll talk more about the study a little bit later on, right? So there was this controversy, and it's a big deal, and so on and so forth, right? Remember, now this is a study about the acceptance of homosexuality in the larger culture. I am not going to talk about whether I agree or disagree with the premise of this study. That's not it at all. What I'm actually really interested in is the retraction and the controversy that underlies all of this. And the controversy is going to be about what the topic is about, sort of, but that's not what it's really going to focus on, right? So you keep going back to the real life situation, but again, be very careful of you starting to talk about your feelings about the RLS or anything like that. All right. Remember, focus on knowledge, and then yeah. All right. It's about yes. It's about applying those TOK tools. Please apply those TOK tools. They're important. All right. So what I have here is some random looking lines. Is this handy dandy little set of boxes and stuff that I will be throwing up periodically to kind of show you how I'm going through my process. Do you have to use something like this? No. But this is sort of like a mind map of the situation, not situation, but my thought processes. So I'm putting this out there for you. All right. So basically, I started out with The Science of Us, and this actually required me to do quite a bit of reading. Yours may not necessarily have that much reading, but like I said, this was something that I was a bit more interested in. So then I started out with The Science of Us, and I saw that article that was talking about the retraction. Then there were other articles related to the same topic in The Science of Us, sort of like as things unraveled. And other people published things like the author of the original article. I'll talk about this a little bit more in the real life situation. And then I looked at the retraction in Science magazine, which was a big deal, right? Looking to see if there's anything specifically that I wanted to use in that. I wanted this topic, so I'm looking at different aspects of this topic. So don't just pick a random topic, but actually, again, go to find a specific something about it. So ultimately, I went back to The Science of Us. There were articles in the New York Times, in National Public Radio, which is awesome, awesome site, by the way. And check out the music section, amazing. And finally, I went back to the Science of Us, which had a long discussion about on the article called "How a Grad Student Uncovered a Huge Fraud." And so they go into it like step by step and quite a bit more information, and kind of follow a more timeline of events. And I thought that fit my purposes a little bit better. And so, having read that article and having looked at some various things that discuss this one topic, I decided to extract the following knowledge claims. Right. So, one of the things that I got from this was that one of the reasons why there's such a big controversy is because people wanted to believe that data. So, more on that later. And the other thing is, I'm like, why is this science thingamajiggy, this study, which is published, and it's been published for a couple of years actually, and all of these people talked about it, but it took some time for this to come to light. And so essentially, what I got from it, and one of the things that one of the other scientists said in it, is that they trusted the name and the work of the senior researcher. So, because this was a trustworthy person, they trusted the data that had their name on it. All right. And people, and the other thing that I thought was that, that I got from it was one of the reasons why this lasted for 2 years and it took this graduate student to come out is because people in academia and research are really afraid of rocking the boat and the repercussions. And the other thing that I learned is that this peer review process, which is used to publish material and essentially add research to the larger field, this one is political science, but this can probably work for all of the other areas of knowledge as well, all the other subjects, is that this peer review process isn't really objective. So from here, I'm going to take my knowledge claims and I'm going to work some magic and develop a knowledge question. Which brings us to our handy dandy little boxy thingy again, right? So up at the top, I have my real life situation, and then you can see I'm going to consider the knowledge claims that I've presented, and then I'm going to extract it. Now, what you have when you look at this is this sort of demarcation between the real world and the TOK world. So the idea is that we have constant connection between these two things, right? So once I've extracted my knowledge claims, what I'm going to do is now bring them into the TOK world, and that's when I'm going to use my tool on how to make a good knowledge question and come up with my knowledge question. And that will be coming soon. All right, which brings me to me knowledge question. So again, I use that handy dandy tool on how to use a knowledge, how to create a knowledge question. And so what I decided to do was to first look at emotion as a way of knowing, right? So I want to include a way of knowing in there. And what I did talk about was what role, right? One of my questions, does emotion play in justifying knowledge? All right. So it's something that I can clearly see came from my real life situation in the presentation. I'll give a little bit more explanation as to how I got to that. But essentially, one of my first claims was that people wanted this study to be true. When I'm thinking about how is it this could have passed muster for a couple of years, people wanted it to be true. So what role does emotion play in justifying knowledge? And so what I've just put in here is this is not stuff that is included necessarily in the presentation, but what I am going to think about for myself is, what do I mean by justify, right? So basically, to justify something means to basically provide evidence or reasons to support something, right? So what I'm thinking is here, my emotions provide all the support that I need, all the foundation, the validity for what I know, right? And so again, what knowledge am I going to be referring to in my RLS? So what I'm talking about here is how it does my emotion connect back to this knowledge, not my emotion, but when looking at my real life situation, um, how is it that this desire for this study to be true overwhelmed people's rationality in looking further at this, right? And so here, right, knowledge claim one, da 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 da. So this is the stuff that's going on in my head as I'm figuring out what it is I'm going to be talking and discussing. So here we go. Here's my diagram again. We've seen me We've seen me bring these knowledge claims into the TOK world, and I've created my TOK question, my knowledge question. And one of the things here is this knowledge question is applicable in this in the real life situation I've presented, but I could also apply it to other things as well. All right, so we've come up with a knowledge question, and so now what I want to do is develop my knowledge question. So what I want to do is, before I delve in, I kind of want to just break it down a little bit in my mind, because the knowledge question is gigantic. My real life situation, there's a lot going on in it. And with all of this, it's so easy to be confused, yeah? So I'm actually going to start with stuff that is a little bit more bite-sized. And from my bite-sized stuff, I will develop my, my arguments. And once I've developed my arguments, then I'm going to hit my textbook and look for stuff, yeah? Okay. So my knowledge question is, just in case you forgot, because what role does emotion play in justifying knowledge? Sorry, I got a cold. All right. So what I'm thinking are, what emotions are at play here, right? Because I'm mostly focusing on why. I'm not focusing on the arguments that came out against the piece in some of those maybe right-wing newspapers or whatever. I'm focusing on why this was accepted, and this was highly publicized by all of these really well-known newspapers and magazines, like the Wall Street Journal, known to be pretty conservative, the New York Times, known to be pretty liberal, etc., etc. So I'm thinking about what emotions are at play here that can then affect, that can help justify knowledge, yeah? Why do people want to believe in the real life situation? And does perception about scientific knowledge blind people? And how can we trust science or math? Because y'all all know math is the work of the devil, because it's magic. Actually, it's not it's not bad when it's like money. But and so from these smaller questions, I'm going to kind of think about my arguments and develop my arguments and counter arguments. The first thing is that in terms of answering, I'm going to try to answer my my knowledge question. It's not necessarily I believe this is true, but I'm trying to come up with possible explanations to answer it, right? So what role does emotion play in justifying knowledge? Well, emotion can blind us to reasoned arguments and make us irrational, right? And so basically what that says is that it doesn't really justify knowledge because it blinds us to reason, and it makes us irrational, right? My counter argument, of course, is that, not of course, but a counter argument is it's scientific knowledge. So coming from this article, scientific knowledge, so I'm bringing in an area of knowledge in there. So scientific knowledge provides support for what we know emotionally. So what role does emotion play in justifying knowledge? Well, it's actually a little bit around. We know things, and then we actually use science to justify it, right? So it's really emotion in conjunction with science. And then another argument is that emotion is important in helping us justify knowledge, because sometimes we have no idea what the knowledge consists of, because we don't know anything about science, because it's really specialized, and we don't know the stuff about the math that is used to justify the research. All we can do is say, magic. It must be true because it feels right in my gut. Okay, hope that helps. And then we go back to my handy dandy little diagram. And so I'm going to develop these arguments, and I'm going to use some of the TOK tools to do that. And then I'm going to apply it back to the real life situation. Right? So I can, you definitely need to bring some other real life situations in there. And the following slide will present some potential ideas. Alrighty, so we've come up with a knowledge question. We've explored the knowledge question a little bit and come up with some arguments. And now I'm going to take those arguments and develop with my TOK tools, yo. Okay. Here we go. So my argument is that emotion blinds us to reasoned arguments and makes us irrational. Okay. So basically, what I'm going to do here is explain using some of the TOK knowledge. Is that the TOK knowledge, the theory of knowledge, the stuff that we've spoken about. So emotions support already held beliefs. So how am my argument is that emotion blinds us to reasoned arguments and makes us irrational. And the reason why emotion does this is because it helps support already held beliefs. That is one of the things that we said in the TOK textbook, is that emotions are not just about what you feel. What you feel is colored by what you already know. And this is the stuff that is based on our culture, our religion, our personal experiences. So we know something is wrong, like how we know something is filtered through our religion, right? And that then provides us our lens to be able to examine other stuff. All right. We talked about the possibility of personal experiences. So I'm going to give a personal experience here in terms of this. And then I'm going to refer it back to the original real life situation, right? So in looking at this, in some ways that what we have here is the reason why people were willing to believe this without really looking further into the mechanics of the study is because it supports what I already know as being true, what I already believe, right? So one of the things that's happening in terms of this real life situation is we have these culture wars about rights for people who are gay, and whether or not religion should play a role, and so on and so forth, right? A little bit more explanation in your thing. And then for myself, now I don't remember when this study came out. I didn't read it. And possibly the reason why I didn't read it is because, well, one, I can't read everything that's on the interwebs, but maybe I saw this in passing in one of the things that I read, but it sounded fine to me. It sounded true. Of course, it makes sense that exposure to people who are gay would help bring down people's discrimination against gays, right? Because in my personal experience, this is true, in that I was raised religiously, and I wouldn't say my family is very discriminatory toward gays, but at the same time, it's not something that I think anyone has back then a really positive thing with, right? But for me, in high school, I had a number of friends who were gay, and they had a lot of issues, right? And so I would spend time with them, and I would know what their problems were and how it related to their being gay. And they were good friends of mine. And because I knew them and knew the struggles that they were having, then it felt like I couldn't be a good person and still discriminate against people and kind of make people have those, be part of what forces people to have those really negative experiences. So for me, because of my personal experience and kind of the emotion that is still like being a good person and being a good friend, and feeling empathy for my friends as they had like suicidal thoughts, or just really crying and these really horrible situations, then of course this makes sense, because that's essentially what happened to me, right? So there we go. I've incorporated, I've explained my argument, I've connected it back to the real life situation, and I've connected it to a personal experience that helps support my argument. Okay, which brings us to, I can then also counter this by saying that there are problems with intuition, right? And some of those problems involve basically this really big bias. Because it's coming from me, I would place more faith in my intuition and my emotion than maybe somebody else's, right? So you can get further information about this from our textbook. But there you should see I've done all of these things for this one argument. I'm not going to go into as much depth for the counter arguments and stuff. But that one should give you a bit of an idea of what I'm kind of looking for, right? Okay, which brings us to a counter argument. Is that it's not so much that emotion blinds us to evidence, but that the evidence exists to support. So it's these two things together. So it's not emotion which has blinded us, but that basically what we already know and experience is now justified. Our emotions are justified because there is this scientific process, right? So the scientific process actually justifies our emotion and therefore our knowledge, not the other way around, right? Because part of the way that we look at science is that it is, we tend to use the word proof, like science proves things. And science is objective because it uses a scientific method. And there's this extra step of objectivity to it because there's this peer review process. So experts say that this information is good. And so because this information is being agreed upon and accepted by all of these experts, Science Magazine is one of the foremost science magazines and science journals, academic journals in the world. So all of these other scientists have read this data and given its approval. So therefore, how can I not approve it, considering that I myself am not a scientist? So I can, again, refer it back to the real life situation. I can refer to myself, how you guys all know I do this all the time because I'm like, there's a study that says blah, 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 blah. That we rely on science as being the expert and then base our understanding on this expert knowledge, when in this case that science may be faulty, and that's exactly, and science is not infallible in and of itself. Okay, that was a bit short, but you can do this. So I've included personal experience in there, real life situation. I've included an area of knowledge, science. You do not need to include an area of knowledge, but if you can and you can push yourself in there, that's awesome. So I talked about science and the way knowledge is added to science as a shared. So scientific knowledge is the shared knowledge that I'm bringing in there. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Which brings us to the next. That emotion is a trustworthy way to make decisions, given that most of us don't understand that science and math involved in information like this. So basically, we all know that math is magic. Math is absolutely magic. Once you get past, like, I don't know, fingers and toes, who knows what's going on, right? So our own reactions to this information is all we really have. So our knowledge is based on emotion, and it's necessary that it's based on emotion because we live in an increasingly complex world and an increasingly magical world, right? Of information that we as like Stone Age apes are in no way able to really handle with our brains that are not developed for today. All right. So there's some stuff in there. You can go to the textbook and look up educated intuition and stuff like that. All right. The other thing that I would consider you do is at the end of every chapter I gave you, there's a little diagram with the way of knowing in the middle and additional questions in it. So, for example, in looking at the way of knowing for emotion, natural sciences, what does biology tell us about the emotions? What role does empathy play in the historian's work, et cetera, et cetera. So these are some extra questions that you can use to help you push forward. All right. And so what I'm saying here is that my argument here is that emotion-based knowledge provides a method of navigation in this very, very complex world. And I refer back to the real life situation. One of the things in this real life situation is we're trying to, governments are trying to develop policies that deal with the situation, that provide rights for the greatest number of people. And despite the issues that they may have been with this study, right? Who of us understands really complex statistics? I remember reading a study myself that basically said, so here I'm incorporating my own personal experience in it. When I was doing statistical methods in the social sciences, believe it or not, like statistics was like the higher level math I really kind of got. Calculus, magic, statistics kind of makes sense. And so that a lot of the people who are using complex statistics don't really even understand it. So for example, the dude who wrote this study is a stats. He was getting his PhD in statistics. So he knows how to manipulate statistics a lot more than the vast majority of people who are actually reading his study and looking through his information. It took another statistics dudes to kind of really explore it and bring it down. All right. So there we go. All right. So here we have my handy dandy diagram again. And so you can see how all of these things have been filled in, and you too can do the same. You too are magic. Do you believe in magic? I do, and it's called math. Don't tell Miss Hamid I said that. So basically, this is it. I know I fooled you. I told you there was a third one. I think I made this long enough for a third one. And if you have any questions, hit me up with an email. Don't hit me upside the head because that will hurt and not be nice. And try to see if you can basically kind of do something similar with yours. You want to have your personal experiences in there. You want to try to include some shared knowledge if you can. So personal knowledge, shared knowledge. Come up with different ways of looking at your question. And lastly, reach a conclusion, right? So what I would say at this point is, yes, emotion plays a strong role in justifying our knowledge because, we're math deficient and knowledge in today's world relies on math, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I can consider the implications for other fields, right? So if we are using our emotions to make these complex decisions, what does that mean for things like education, for example, right? Because we're deciding what to teach, how to teach things based on these studies. What does that mean for anything that deals with social science and statistics? And what does that mean if our public policy is vulnerable to cray-cray people making cray-cray information up? I don't know, but that's part of what you do in your summation, in your conclusion. And I'm ending this right before 30 minutes. I hope you enjoyed my presentation kind of thing. Not really. Bye, y'all.